From the Delhi studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on The Debate.
Arnab Goswami on The Debate at 9. Presented by Amity University. Powered by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group. The new Kia Seltos. Century Ply. Club Prime. PolicyBazaar.com. And JK Tire.
Good evening and welcome. Viewers and supporters of the Republic Media Network at 9 a.m. in what has been, without doubt, the fastest ever broadcast television launch in India's history. Republic Kannada, ladies and gentlemen, will be live. So Republic Kannada goes live at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I want to thank you, we want to thank you, our supporters and our viewers, for believing in us. And I can assure you, our teams and the Republic Kannada newsroom is powered by your love, as they are set to change the news genre in Karnataka from 9 a.m. tomorrow. So 9 a.m. tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, available on all DTH cable TV platforms across the country, on satellite as well. Republic Kannada, 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll tell you more about that, our latest launch from the Republic Media Group, in just a while. Moving on for now. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Trudeau, he's completely lost the plot. Justin Trudeau, the supporter of terrorism, the open terror backer with sympathies for terrorists. He's at the point of no return. I would have said that he has completely messed up, but I think he has messed up to a point of no return now. He's himself a mess, floundering at press conferences, bogus scripts on rote, 5 days in, flying to New York, being badgered to specifics to back his stupid claim, and he shows up with nothing. Till 5 days ago, when he stood there, at least you'd hope that he would back up his claim, his ridiculous claim. But what is tumbling out of the Canada Khalistani terrorist closet is a murkier reality than I always knew existed. When this Trudeau pontificated on the farmers' protests and cracked down on the protests back home, one always felt that there has to be something more than meets the eye with this floundering mess of a Canadian Prime Minister. However, this reality that stumbled out is a potential link between Canadian authorities and terrorist groups. This is a very serious matter. Trudeau can't cover it up now. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a weak man politically. He's a weak man. And the only way he thinks he's going to continue in his office is by joining hands with terrorists and terrorist groups. That means he's legally, morally, and ethically weak. Ladies and gentlemen, on top of the debate tonight, I have some stunning revelations that have just come into our newsroom, which all weaves out very credibly, in my opinion, personally, to corroborate the fact that essentially Justin Trudeau is fighting for the right to support terrorism. He says he talks about the rule of law. How wrong he is. And the people of Canada should tell him and should realize as well that what they are doing by talking about the rule of law is actually cultivating terrorism. What they are doing is that they are ruining their country. What they are doing is that just to sustain the weak politics of the fumbling Trudeau, they have allowed their country, Canada, to become a safe haven for terrorists, terrorism, terrorist groups, organized crime. And how can supporting terrorism become a fundamental right? I ask you today, ladies and gentlemen, can the support to terrorism become a fundamental right? Become state policy? And if so, will Justin Trudeau be reminded by the history of those who did so, Or will he fall to his own fate, much like the fate of his opinion poll ratings back home tonight? So viewers, my point is very, very clear. Terrorism is terrorism. Terrorists are terrorists. Organized crime, gangsters, terror, terrorism. Is Trudeau absolutely sure that this is not going to bite him back home? What if the bomb blasts and murders and killings, and I ask the people of Canada this, and I hope they are watching, what if all the murders and bomb blasts and terrorist incidents, hijacks, what if all this organized crime and terrorism, instead of using Canada as a base to carry out these attacks in India, what if these people, these groups start carrying out these acts of terrorism in Canada itself or in other countries? Will Trudeau then come out and say that in the name of fighting for the rule of law, I shall defend my fundamental right to support terrorism? Ladies and gentlemen, I say this as much to you, and I hope this message goes out to the people of Canada. Why are you allowing, why are Canadians allowing their country to be an official evangelist of terrorism? The consequences are dangerous. The road that Canada is on today is the road that Pakistan was on, is the road that Afghanistan was on. Does Canada want to become the new Pakistan, the new Afghanistan? Ladies and gentlemen, my only appeal tonight to the people of Canada, learn the lessons of history. Don't become a terror-backing state. The consequences are dangerous. Trudeau has a short-term political career that is going to ebb and end soon. But the consequences for Canada will be beyond measure in any way. Debate number 1 tonight. That's debate number 1 this evening. This man sitting in Canada, a terrorist supporter. Ladies and gentlemen, debate number 2 tonight. We give it back to Canada, we put China in our place. I think our foreign policy is stellar. Let's back it. Debate number 3 tonight. No backing with Sanatan. No messing with Sanatan. I correct myself. I think all those people who are carrying out Sanatan hate speech, who have now been given notices by the Supreme Court, should be called upon to explain themselves and apologize. That's debate number 3, and here are the headlines this Friday evening on the Debate Tonight.
As I said on Monday, there are credible reasons to believe that agents of the government of India were involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil.
90 hours and counting, the fumbling, unsure, head-scratching Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is yet to offer a single iota of evidence to back his allegations against India. But the slain terrorist's son spills the beans, reveals that Nijjar was very much in touch with Canadian intelligence. Why was Canadian intelligence cultivating a terrorist asset?
The sports minister's visit to China for the Asian Games opening ceremony has been cancelled. No official will visit. Made a clear statement that India has the right to respond at the right time.
India hits back. INB minister cancels his visit to China after Beijing blocks Arunachal athletes' entry for the Asian Games. From Canada to China, Modi's muscular foreign policy makes it clear: don't mess with India. Top court sends notice to Udayanidhi, A. Raja and the Tamil Nadu government. There can be no more free run, it's clear, for anti-Hindu hate mongers. And it's a new dawn for the news in Canada. Republic Canada is all set to disrupt the news genre with 100% commitment to news. Republic Canada goes live at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, the Canadian Prime Minister is completely cornered. He has made a huge allegation, sabotaged India-Canada friendship for the sake of it. But when asked direct questions to show evidence, he was seen dodging the questions and instead talking gibberish. It is quite clear now, the confused, fumbling Trudeau never had any evidence. He has no proof and he has no case. He has destroyed Canada's reputation globally. In fact, it is Trudeau who should now answer why was the Khalistani terrorist Nijjar in touch with Canadian intelligence? What is the link between Canada's intelligence and terrorist groups? Here's a recap and then we debate.
It's been 90 hours and counting since Justin Trudeau accused India.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Since then, he's had 3 chances to state his evidence, but that's a word that seemingly escaped his vocabulary.
As I said on Monday, there are credible reasons to believe that agents of the government of India were involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil.
I mean, if I understand correctly, are you suggesting that the evidence was extensive? Is that what you're saying?
I'm repeating what I said on Monday afternoon, that there are credible allegations that we need to take extremely seriously.
Here's what he said when he was asked directly.
First, can I ask you a couple of things about India? Will you share the evidence?
First of all, Canada has a rigorous and independent justice system that we trust to follow through the processes. As a country of the rule of law, we will ensure that those processes are strictly abided by and respected.
So shifty have Trudeau's replies been, he won't even answer what India has made clear in public on day 1.
Prime Minister Modi confirm or deny these allegations when you talked to him about them?
As I said, I had a direct and frank conversation with the Prime Minister in which I shared my concerns in no uncertain terms.
We had issued a press release, I think on the 19th it was, I have a copy here, where we said, yes, these allegations were raised by Prime Minister Trudeau with Prime Minister, and Prime Minister rejected them.
Grandstanding on values and rule of law aside, Trudeau is gasping for breath, cornered at home as he is abroad.
Of terrorism or a hate crime targeting a religious group is allowed in the name of freedom of speech and expression.
As per a Canadian report, Trudeau's popularity at home is dwindling, even as the murk around Canada's own involvement with slain terrorist Nijjar is deepening.
Now, Nijjar's son, Balraj, has come out and said that he was in fact in frequent touch with Canadian intelligence operatives, and that few months before his killing, he had sought a bulletproof vest and that was denied by the cops in Canada, clearly suggesting that there is more than meets the eye. Was Nijjar a Canadian intelligence asset? That's the question.
Trudeau's dug himself into a hole he can't escape, alone and unpopular, tying himself into knots after making allegations he can't prove. Has Trudeau misfired completely? Let's debate.
We got different versions tonight on Republic. Brahma Chelani, author, professor, strategic studies, Center for Policy Research, fellow in the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin. Professor Madhav Nalapat, vice chairman of the Manipal Advanced Research Group, consulting editor of the ITV Group. Major Gaurav Arya, consulting editor, strategic affairs of the Republic Media Network. We have Dr. Zachary Paikin, non-resident research fellow at the Institute of Peace and Diplomacy in Canada. He's joining us from Geneva tonight. I can see Terry Milowski, former journalist of the CBC. Darshan Singh is an international affairs expert with views on this subject from London. And Michael Kugelman's joining us. He's Deputy Director of the Asia Program at the Wilson Center in Washington. My first question is to Corey Morgan, columnist for West Standard News. He's joining us live from Alberta in Canada. Mr. Morgan, I've been watching this, we've all been watching this with interest in India. And it is alarming for us to see that after all this time, Mr. Trudeau is unable to actually talk about any hard evidence. And for a Prime Minister to act against another nation, a significant nation, a sovereign nation, and when asked about the evidence, he doesn't seem to have any. What does this indicate in your view? It's been so many days, he's not able to produce a single iota of evidence against India.
Well, it means he was being very irresponsible when he tried to directly tie the murder of Nijjar to Indian agents. Either he has the evidence and can't disclose it. In that case, again, he shouldn't have been publicly bringing that up in the House of Commons then, or indeed, he doesn't have the evidence, which is even more irresponsible. We have such an important relationship between Canada and India. To disrupt it like this, almost whimsically on the part of the Prime Minister, is unforgivable. So something has happened. There's more of a nuanced situation going on. But again, then perhaps the place to discuss this wasn't standing and grandstanding on the floor of the House of Commons. It could have been in more discreet diplomatic discussions. And now he's gotten himself into a mess. And as you can see, with the kind of answers he gives at press conferences that we as Canadians have had to endure out of him for some years, it's hard to get solid answers out of him later.
I agree with you, Corey, and I thank you for your introductory comments on this. And now I want to go to Terry. Terry, we spoke a couple of days back, and from New York, Trudeau was floundering question after question. He was asked on very specific questions to back his allegation, and let alone diplomatic protocol. If he actually had the evidence or the E of evidence, I mean, he's avoiding the word evidence anyway. And he's gone into the qualification of statement. He's saying, I have credible evidence. I have credible reasons to believe. That's a very subjective view. He doesn't use the word hard evidence. If he's saying India has killed a Canadian, the reporter's first question, the reporter is excellent. Trudeau is asked why nobody's supporting him. He pauses, then goes into a tangent about how Canada is a country that believes in the rule of the law. He's not giving direct statements for something with so much significance, like literally going into diplomatic war with India.
Let me just push back a little bit on that. The Canadians are pointing out, and the Americans are pointing out, quite strongly, in fact. The White House called my former colleagues at the CBC to say, no, this reporting that we are not supporting the Canadians is incorrect. The Washington Post has backed off on that its story to that effect. But that's a side issue. The Canadians have now begun very tentatively to tiptoe towards releasing some evidence. That's all. It's no more than that. But they have tried in the last 24 hours to turn the heat up a little bit on the Indian side by suggesting not what the evidence is, to be sure, and that remains the hole in the heart of the Prime Minister's presentation. Without actual detailed, convincing evidence, this is going nowhere for Trudeau. But they have begun to leak. And this was predictable. Now we're into the leak phase of this investigation, where the Canadians are saying, we have signals intelligence from one of the Five Eyes allies, presumably the United States. SIGINT, as it's called in the spy trade, not HUMINT, which is humans talking, but signals intelligence, a wiretap, for example. And that ties a unnamed Indian government official or perhaps a diplomat to the machinations around this murder. Well, it doesn't tell us very much. We can't hang very much on it. But there's a second part of the leaks overnight that Indians should be aware of, I believe. And that is that the Canadians are saying in the weeks before the G20, when Trudeau brought it up with Modi, in those weeks, the Indians never denied our allegations in private. Now they're denying them in public, but they didn't deny them in private. Well, we could resolve this quite easily because we know that Mr. Modi knows what Trudeau is talking about, because it's impossible to imagine, no Indian would believe, that their Prime Minister Modi would sit there with Trudeau in that brief but frosty meeting in New Delhi at the end of the G20, and that he would have sat there like a potted plant and asked no questions when Trudeau raised this with him in no uncertain terms, in his words. So Modi would have asked, what are you talking about? What's your evidence? And Trudeau would have revealed something. So if Modi wanted to blow Trudeau out of the water, all he has to do is say, look, Trudeau is reluctant to reveal his evidence. I know why, because it's rubbish. And here it is. Here's what's wrong with it. This guy wasn't even in the neighborhood, or whatever it is. He could blow Trudeau out of the water by revealing what he knows and showing that it's nonsense. And he's not doing that. So they're both painted into a corner, with great respect. It's not just Trudeau that is not producing something concrete. It's also Mr. Modi that has some knowledge that he's not sharing right now.
Terry, there's a fundamental difference, however. I mean, with respect, I would like to qualify this. Maybe Brahma Chalani and Madhav Nalapat can explain this better. Terry, Trudeau is on a weak political wicket. You are aware that even in the Canadian media, people are saying, why did he suddenly throw this thing up? And what is the timing of throwing this up? This is happening at a time when the majority of Canadians, as per polls, want him to go. His position is weak, so he has to pander to certain sentiments. But more than that, also, he's got to change the narrative back home. He needs to talk about something else than the issues that Canadians want him out for. And maybe this was seen to be that worthy issue that could just be picked up. And fundamentally, you change the narrative in the media in Canada. But did he think of the consequences? Has he been mature about it? And I want to tell you this. I mean, just not because, you know, of any other reason, because the Indian channel. Let me tell you, Narendra Modi is an extremely strong wicket politically. We've just had a joint session of Parliament passing a huge legislation ensuring 1/3 reservation for women. He's on the path of victory towards the next general election. So it's a study in contrast in a way. Modi is on a very strong wicket politically back home, unlike Trudeau. So I just want to get Madhav to respond to this. Madhav, you heard Terry, you heard Corey. What do you think?
Look, first of all, Arnab, Trudeau is following in the footsteps of his father. Don't forget that Pierre Trudeau refused India's request to basically deport a chap called Flounder, if I remember. And he refused on what ground? That India was not sufficiently respectful towards Queen Elizabeth II. I mean, Pierre Trudeau seemed to be extremely concerned about the supposed lack of respect that India has shown Queen Elizabeth II, presumably by not making a head of state. And you know what happened? In 1985, AI-182 was blown up by the same fellow Parmar, and hundreds of people died. And every one of those deaths should be laid at the door of the father of Justin Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, who rejected India's request to basically extradite the bomber before he bombed AI-182. I mean, your guest from Ontario, I heard that he's from CBC. CBC is funded by the Canadian taxpayer. Trudeau's government is in support of funding it. And obviously, that gives the channel a certain tilt. The Conservative Party doesn't want to fund it. And if it comes to power in the next election, which CBC says, God forbid, then its funding may be cut. So they have a deliberate interest in planted stories. And may I say a third thing, Arnab, having worked with people in the technology sector, I recently gave the keynote address at the WALT conference, global conference, all about technology, which is an international conference. Artificial intelligence can mimic now Terry's voice and can mimic Terry and put Terry in the position of having videographs or doing all kinds of horrible things. And this is the situation. This is ridiculous. There is nothing absolutely in this charge. This is completely, totally wrong charge. And there are two countries very happy with this. One is China and the other is Pakistan. And may I point out, one more point. Trudeau's talking about rule of law. It's rule of the outlaw. What do these people want? What are they doing? A minister in his government checked 17 years back, Terry, the funds that he facilitated to the groups active in India. Check 23, 24 years back, the funds that he facilitated to groups in India and what they did with that money. And look at me in the face and tell me, is terror funding a legitimate expression of democratic values and freedom of speech? I can understand your CBC tilt. I can understand you're standing up for Trudeau and you're talking about Indian channels. Let me tell you, in the age of the internet, we don't have Canadian channels. We don't have Indian channels. We have global channels. And some channels are seen across the world and some are not. But I'd like to point out very frankly, Arnab, this is an effort to torpedo the India-US alliance. I can tell you that. And I do not believe that the Americans are so foolish as to buy this story. Justin Trudeau has got people in his cabinet who have funded terrorist groups, actually in his cabinet, in his government, in his party, and the funding trail, the internet trail, all these trails, the telephone trails are there, visible to Trudeau. The man is ignoring it because he wants to remain Prime Minister.
Madhav. No, Madhav, the issue here is that even globally, there isn't much sympathy building. And I'm not, please do not think I'm taking any prejudiced position on that. I'm watching it very closely. I don't think there is much support building for Trudeau or for Canada, because anyone knows that the person in there, not that anyone deserves to be killed, but if a person has been killed, terrorists are killed by terrorists, gangsters are killed by gangsters. They are part of gangster groups, gangster crimes. You're part of the mafia. You're a gangster. You're a terrorist. And not that many of them don't have violent deaths. It's very, very unfortunate, but that is a reality. Now, what I find very, very surprising, Brahma, is the militancy with which Trudeau is arguing for a terrorist. And then saying that we have a right to have a hotline with a terrorist. Our intelligence agencies should be with a terrorist. The terrorist can carry out bomb blasts in India, killings in India, kill innocent political workers, politicians, innocent citizens in India. But he has a right to do it from Canadian soil because that's the way we are in Canada. That is a fundamental argument, and he's fighting for a right to support terrorism, calling it the rule of law. That issue cannot be diverted, in my view. At some point, Canadians will have to discuss this. Brahma, what do you think?
Well, Trudeau talks about the rule of law and a rules-based order. He has marred Canada's important relationship with India over the unsolved murder of an international terrorist fugitive who was wanted in India for multiple acts of terrorism, including a deadly cinema bombing that killed or wounded 46 people. And the bigger issue is that while shedding tears over the death of this terrorist, Trudeau, while talking about a rules-based order last year, celebrated the US assassination of an old retired terrorist, al-Zawahiri, saying it was an important step to a safer world. Trudeau's hypocrisy is really stunning. But unfortunately for him, not only has he created a political mess for him at home, because Canadians are demanding, show us the evidence, Mr. Trudeau, that that call is growing louder in Canada. But he is also drawing international attention for the first time to Canada's role as a haven for terrorists and militants. For the first time, there is spotlight
Terry, you want to counter? One second. Brahma, Terry's countering you. I'm allowing it.
Yeah, I'll
Brahma,
be short.
Terry's
I'll be
countering
short
you. I'm
now.
allowing it. Brahma, Terry's countering you for a moment. Let's go 50-50, 1 versus 1. Yes, please, Terry. Terry to Brahma.
I just very quickly want to say one thing, since the CBC became an issue and so forth. First, I'm retired from the CBC, and second, for 20 years, I've been reporting that Canada became a safe haven, the name of a documentary that I did 20 years ago for overseas terrorists, and that it's been a national disgrace. The story that you cited about Justin Trudeau's father in saying no to Indira Gandhi and refusing to extradite the Air India bomber, that was my story, by the way. I was the one that dug that out of the archives and reported it. And I was the one that reported, for example, on Trudeau's last visit to India when he had a terrorist dinner at the High Commissioner's residence in New Delhi. So if you're going after somebody who is indulging and coddling the liberal tolerance for terrorists in Canada, you've got the wrong guy. That's the thing I wanted to say.
Terry, I take that. I take that, and I think we appreciate that. Terry, we appreciate that. Now, Madhav's responding to you. Madhav is responding to you. Yes.
Well done, Terry, well done. And 3 cheers to you. And may there be more such people in Canada. I'm only pointing out that you seem to be giving the benefit of the doubt to Justin Trudeau on a matter in which essentially he has tried to basically blow to smithereens the Indo-Pacific Alliance. And we all know the country against whom that alliance is directed, a country that wants to dominate the Indo-Pacific. And this is what Justin Trudeau has done. And you will know more than anybody else the close linkages of the Trudeau family with a particular country, namely China. Not only Justin Trudeau, but his father.
I think I need to. Yeah, I think that's the elephant in the room. Yeah, I think that's the elephant in the room. I'm willing to take that head on, and I want to get in the others. I want to get in. I think that's we got Michael Kugelman, right? Michael, hi, how are you? And before I come to you, Dr. Zachary Palpakin, Dr. Zachary, is Trudeau doing this on China's behest? Because Trudeau's main political opponents believe that Trudeau is working in China's interest. And their allegations are that members of Canada's security services have been leaking information about the election interference allegations in the media because Trudeau is working against Canadian interests. That is an allegation, right? If allegations were absolute, then China's ambassador to Canada accused Canada of white supremacy. The Chinese ambassador made that allegation. If allegations are absolute, then there are allegations against Trudeau as well, that he's China's man.
Arnab, thanks first of all for having me back on your program. No, he is not doing this at China's behest. Our relations with China are not in a good place right now. They have not been in a good place for some time, especially since the Meng Wanzhou incident with the two Michaels. We have not been able to reset our relationship with China, and that is going to be a major strategic challenge for Canada going forward. I think that the bigger issue here is that we've been dealing with a scandal recently in Canada concerning China's foreign interference in Canada, which has been very politically damaging to the governing Liberal Party. And basically, whether you view it as the government having been incompetent or deliberately sweeping certain things under the rug, one way or another, it appears as if the government, to many, was not forthright enough on this issue of China's interference in the past Canadian federal election. And because of this, I think that there was a political imperative at home for Prime Minister Trudeau not to make it look like he was potentially sweeping a second instance or alleged instance of foreign interference under the rug, and therefore a need to go public with this before the media were going to publish this. And he was basically given, I understand, an ultimatum to that basically the Globe and Mail was going to publish this story within 24 hours, and therefore he went early. He went public with this rather earlier than he would have liked. So I think this is a problem in general in Canada, as we're in reactive mode.
That's a political calculation. But that's a political calculation. My question to Michael, sorry to keep you waiting, Michael, I also want to bring in Gaurav Arya into the debate. My question to you, Michael, is it realistic for Trudeau to expect, the United Kingdom, the US, Australia, all of India's partners and allies across the world to really double down on India? Because that's not happening. Is he being unrealistic in his expectations? And did he fail to make that diplomatic calculation before making his political move against India?
Well, I think he may be unrealistic if he expects Canada's Five Eyes allies to all come out and publicly condemn India. Given the nature of the U.S. Relationship with India and the other Five Eyes allies relationship with India. Though I don't think he's unreasonable in expecting his Five Eyes allies to be willing to, at the least, express support for what he and Canada are going through right now. I mean, let's be very clear. I mean, the U.S., speaking specifically about the U.S. is a treaty ally of Canada. The U.S. is not a treaty ally of India. So when Canada's leader comes out and goes public on these allegations against India, naturally the U.S. government will take them very seriously. And that doesn't matter which country is being targeted. And that's what Jake Sullivan meant yesterday when he said that there's no exemptions here. It doesn't matter who's the subject of these allegations, the U.S. will take them seriously. But indeed, the U.S. is in a tough spot because it values its relations in a big way with India, which is a strategic partner for reasons that we all know. So I think that it would not be realistic to think that you're going to have this effort on the part of Canada's Western allies to essentially try to confront India. I think what will be more realistic is that the U.S. would try to play a back channel sort of mediator role to try to get both the Canadians and the Indians to figure out ways to de-escalate. I don't think now is the time for that because tensions are way too high. But the U.S. is in a very difficult position. It's looking at its treaty ally to the north that's made these extremely explosive allegations against India, and the U.S. is also looking at India, a country that it knows it cannot afford to risk antagonizing or imperil relations with for reasons that we all know. So I think that the quiet back channel route is the one that the U.S. might wish to take sometime soon.
True. Well, I think so. But I also believe, if I may, Gaurav, that there is another issue which comes up, Michael, and that is not just about, about the diplomacy that's happening in the back channel. The ethical issue, Gaurav, that comes up out here is whether the world's most powerful nations will go to war with each other over the murder of a terrorist. I think that's where I think, Gaurav, Trudeau and the Canadians who are in power right now are being totally unrealistic. This is a man with a red corner notice against him. He's a wanted man. He has a red corner notice of Interpol, right? He has carried out some of the most dastardly terrorist attacks in India. He has killed 46 people in a single terrorist attack in a cinema hall in India. And to expect India and America and Canada to go to war with each other, India and America, Australia, the UK to risk everything over why this terrorist was killed, I think is completely unrealistic. The man is a terrorist mastermind. If the question should be, why did he get a Canadian passport in the first place, rather than try and get into who killed him? Gaurav, how do you view this?
No, absolutely, Arnab. First of all, I agree with you. In that, I'll just take you through this. An Ipsos poll was there by the Global News. Now, they say that his ratings are down to 31% and his main opposition leader is 40%. So in this poll, this is a Canadian poll, Justin Trudeau is behind. And they say that if elections were to be held today, he would lose. That is the first part. Second thing is, Arnab, this whole thing about Trudeau being so affectionate towards a known terrorist. I mean, I sense, I don't want to use the word racism here because that is being flaunted around a little too much. But I do say that there are separate standards that the West has for itself and for the others. For example, Arabs bomb American buildings in 9/11. Canada goes to war because Americans were killed in the United States of America. Canada goes to war, sends troops to kill people in Iraq and in Afghanistan, right? It's not Canada's war, but because of some treaties, the NATO understanding, they go to war. But when India has a concern that here is a guy who may be responsible directly and indirectly both, directly for less than 50 people, but indirectly for hundreds of deaths. I mean, when America hunted down Osama bin Laden, right, the world cheered and nobody asked America for proof. What proof do you have? Because it happened in the West, so everything is very clear in front of us. India did not kill Niger. That part is true. But the problem is that, you see, the way they look at different instances, if somebody kills people in India, then it's all right, because that is under Canadian freedom of speech, and you can settle down here in Canada and enjoy a good life. But the problem is that if somebody in the West dies, or there is a, heaven forbid, a terror attack on the West, it is looked at differently, and the West reserves the right to respond in the way they deem fit. Saudis attack America, you destroy Iraq, who had nothing to do with the attacks. You go and invade Afghanistan, and that's all right. The world says, okay, war on terror, great. But if, and I'm sure Niger was killed, I'm not saying by the Indian government, but it could be gang wars, you know, all these Khalistani gang wars amongst each other. So all of them are of Indian origin, and somebody would have bumped off Niger because they are drug lords and they get a lot of money through drugs. So finally, it is a person of Indian origin who would have knocked off Niger. So this is not the first Khalistani death to have taken place in Canada, and they keep on killing each other for money, and this is very common.
Yeah, but is this
for the Prime Minister of Canada?
Is this a subject? Yes. Yes, please complete.
So, Arnab, basically what I'm saying is that, you know, in essence, what happens is that you have a different rule. You can invade countries because you suspect weapons of mass destruction to be present. You displace millions of people. You bomb wedding parties. You put hellfire missiles into wedding parties in Afghanistan and tribal Pakistan, and it's all right because the West is doing it. And one Niger dies, and he on the floor of the parliament says India does it, and then he's not even giving proof.
No, he's making it an issue. No. See, he's making it an issue. I personally think, and I think, Terry and Corey, I want to go back to you because you understand Canadian politics well. I am sure there is a political imperative, Corey, behind why Trudeau is supporting these groups, who we believe are terrorist groups. I just am curious to know, Corey and Terry, first to you, Corey, are Canadians comfortable with so many globally recognized terrorists operating out of Canada? Recently, there is a terrorist who gave a threat to Indo-Canadian Hindus. He's in the US, I think, called Pannun. He says, Indo-Canadian Hindus, you have repudiated your allegiance to India, to Canada and the Canadian Constitution. Your destination is India. Leave Canada, go to India. When these people, and there are 26 major extradition requests, Corey, against well-known terrorists from India. These are people who carry out major terrorist attacks in India. Are Canadians comfortable with what is happening to their country, whatever the internal politics are? Are they comfortable? Are they debating these issues?
You know, I don't know if they're debating it in such a sense of how many terrorists may indeed be operating out of Canada. The bigger problem we have is I think people are attributing too much thought or malice on the part of Trudeau to what's actually more like weak leadership and incompetence, to be blunt. He doesn't like dealing with the complicated issues. Extraditions are difficult to deal with. We do pride ourselves as being a safe haven for people if they are wrongly being prosecuted in another country, and we're very careful about when we might extradite somebody, but that takes a lot of nuanced diplomatic negotiations, discussions. We don't want to harbor terrorists, but at the same time, we don't want to be frivolous about taking anybody out of the country who is here already. Trudeau just would rather not deal with it. That's the problem. He tends to sweep problems under the rug. And what's happening right now is he's been diplomatically clumsy. He's created a mess. And we're now that's what the mess we're discussing today. When was there something that could have been done with Mr. Nijar before? And again, to come out and claim that he was murdered by another state. Well, again, if you're going to do that, we need to see some evidence. And if that evidence is there, if there's proof, Canadians will be horrified. And if there isn't evidence, then we really need to re-examine everything.
I tell you this, Corey, recently we were horrified. I'm not sure of which Canadian town, but Terry, you remember this, that there was a tableau in which the assassination of former Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was celebrated in a tableau. You had the tableau where you had mock-ups of terrorists shooting her and the blood oozing out, and this is happening on the streets of a Canadian city. A political assassination carried out was being celebrated. Is this something that's normal in Canada? Is Canada going to normalize this? I mean, also, Terry, where's the conscience here? In the Kanishka bombing happened in 1985. How many Canadians died? 329 innocent people died. 88 children were killed. 88 children were killed, right? The report was only published in 2010, and the main person behind it, Parmar, is yet to be convicted. A person involved in the killing of 329 people in a plane bombing is hanging around loose on the streets of Canada, maybe shopping in a mall next to you. Are Canadians okay with this? Is this a rule of law, Terry? Why are these debates not happening in Canada?
It's not, and I've been ranting about it for 20 years. I mean, you take the example, that was Brampton, Ontario, was the city where they had this grotesque tableau on the back of a flatbed truck celebrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi. There you have the pictures, and you see the extra red paint splattered over her sari so that children really get the message. This was a bloody affair, and we're proud of it. This was a great thing that we did here. Yes, Canadians have normalized bit by bit, inch by inch, the celebration of terrorism all over Canada. This was in Brampton, Ontario. What about the life-size pictures on the wall of a Major Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia, showing a gorgeous, heroic martyr picture with ceremonial sword and ornate turban of Talvinder Parmar, the Kanishka bomber, the worst mass murderer in Canadian history? What about more recently, these Sikhs for Justice killer posters, painting targets on the backs of Indian diplomats by calling them killers? And not just Indian diplomats in Canada, by the way, but Indian diplomats all over the world were named and shamed and photographed and their names shown, identified as killers, so that if any nut happens to get the message and happens to have a gun or a knife, he might be able to act on it. And they offered cash rewards. Did you know this? Cash rewards for their home addresses of these targeted diplomats, including the Sikh ambassador in the United States from India. I mean, so this is what we call normal in Canada, and you can see why people might have been ranting as I have for 20 years.
I mean, that wouldn't be that.
Be an inflection point where we're done with that.
How is this not being debated in Canada? Brahma, if I hear this, and I appreciate your empathy with the issue, Terry, and I can see there's a strong journalistic instinct which finds what is going on immoral, but how is that not part of a debate? Why aren't people in Canada asking, in the process of sort of strengthening his short-term political position, he's ruining, he's going to long-term isolate Canada and ruin Canada. And also Brahma, maybe Canada is not sure about how strong the present Indian leadership is, how well connected we are globally. We will leverage our defense, economy and trade positions to ensure that our interests are never affected globally. And we're also going to push back on Canada. What do you expect from the Modi government, Brahma, knowing their foreign policy stance?
Well, first, Canada is not an adversary of India. It's a friend. So it's a very unfortunate
it's not.
That the bilateral relationship has reached its lowest ebb. But forget about Indian security. Just think about Canadian security. Canada has become a hotbed of Sikh militancy. Militants that are promoting or glorifying terrorism. What does this do to Canada's internal security in the long run? Canada is compromising its own security and the security of other partner countries in the West by becoming the international headquarters of the Khalistan movement. This is where the most wanted Khalistani terrorists are now located. A day will come when these very men, many of them located in British Columbia, carry out a major terrorist strike either in Canada or in another Western country. That day will come. So even though India has been pressing Canada for so many years now, and this pressure has been exerted on Ottawa even before Trudeau became the prime minister 8 years ago, almost, the fact is that under Trudeau, these violence espousing militants feel more emboldened because of Trudeau's tacit political ties to Sikh radicals. The New Democrats leader, Jagmeet Singh, is such a close partner of Trudeau. It's a case of the tail wagging the dog.
Very.
Pandering to the
Absolutely, sir.
radical Sikhs was also evident when Trudeau, interfering in Indian politics, sought to provoke and egg on
everyone,
the farmers that were blockading highways near New Delhi. He cheered them on. He tried to encourage the anti-government farmer protests in India, and then later, in the style of an autocrat, he declared emergency at home, a national emergency, and crushed peaceful protests against his vaccination policy. His government froze bank accounts. It used state power to quash the blockades by protesters. This guy's double standards are astounding. And I think he is not looking at Canada's own long-term interests. This is the most unfortunate part.
Yeah.
Canada is a great country.
Absolutely.
He should not be undermining
I just want to end on that point.
interests,
I want to end on that point, Brahma. And I want a comment from Dr. Zachary on this. See, Dr. Zachary, if you can see the tone of this discussion, as Gaurav will also agree, we don't see Canada as an adversary or an enemy. We don't. We are just extremely disappointed at the way this has been handled. I think I think you get the sense. I mean, we're just horrified at the immaturity of the process rather than look upon Canada as an adversary. And I think this can have big consequences if not resolved quickly.
Indeed, I think that there's a major problem of strategic empathy in general in Ottawa as it relates to understanding the perceptions of other powers, particularly those from the global south. We are still a very U.S. and Western Europe oriented country in terms of our natural foreign policy inklings. And I don't think it's really hit us, how influential countries like China and India have become at this point. And it's left us very poorly equipped, I think, to deal with the world that's emerging right now. And that's something that we're going to have to reckon with. The reality is that we, as a country in Canada, the luxury really just to conduct a foreign policy based on moral pronouncements for a long time, directed largely at a domestic audience, whether it's an ideological audience or an ethnocultural audience. And unfortunately, that has taken our foreign policy hostage. And so it's only by feeling this pain, and it's not just the pain
I do understand
that, of losing two straight Security Council bids that we are hopefully going to adjust course over time.
Absolutely, and I think influential nations must work with each other. This is unfortunate what has happened, but I appreciate the candor with which Terry, Dr. Zachary, you and Corey have contributed to the discussion. Gaurav, Madhav, and Dr. Chelani, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, when I come back on the other side, we've had an escalation in the ongoing diplomatic row between India and China. And a very good stance that has been taken by the government of India when China has tried to browbeat some of our athletes. I'll give you more details on that on the other side. Also what it reflects on the changing nature of Indian foreign policy when I'm back.